plus sign with an eye symbol. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to draw a square around her entire iris. And that will get rid of the red eye. There you go. So that's really simple, one of my favorite tools. She has 2 more blemishes that maybe I'll just go in and get rid of since we're here. Why not? That one was pretty easy. Grab some of the skin from around it and we'll just cover it up, basically like copying and pasting. Perfect. Now we're going to hit save again, close it out, and we're going to see what the next composition looks like. And you'll see that because we are working from a linked file, it is updating this image as we go. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to double click it again. It's going to open it again, like I said, in a new tab, and we're going to learn a new tool today, and that is the Liquify tool. I don't really recommend using this too often, but I mean, everyone has that moment where maybe a picture is not super flattering. So I see a quick chat here. Do I know how to fix frizzy hair? Of course I do. I can help you with that in a couple minutes, okay? So Jen asks, when we place linked, is the objective to add one photo to another? And how am I so quickly changing my circle size? So on my keyboard, there are some keyboard shortcuts, and the 2 keys located to the right of the letter P, they're like a bracket symbol. Those interchangeably will make the circle larger or smaller. That's at least on a Mac. I am not sure about PC, but I believe it's the same. And then placing a linked image is that the objective to add one photo to another. So what I'm doing in this other composition is kind of like layering photos to create a new photo. So some might call it photo illustration or just like creating a new composition. Sometimes people might do this if they want just a different background in an image, maybe for a headshot or something of that nature, or they just are creating a new file. So today we're going to learn the Liquify tool. So that's located at the top under filter. I think you guys can't see the top there, the very top there for me, but it's located at the very top under filter. A drop-down menu will appear. You're going to scroll down to right here where it says Liquify. Okay. That's going to open up your image in a new panel. And you'll see there's a bunch of stuff over here. You can do a lot of really cool stuff in the Liquify panel. We're going to use the one that says Forward Warp Tool. And what the Forward Warp Tool does is Photoshop does a really good job with these little icons that they've come up with. The Forward Warp Tool looks like a finger poking something. And that's literally what we're going to do. So maybe what we want to do here is, and I can say that I have done this to pictures of myself, especially like professional headshots. Sometimes if the photographer doesn't take the picture from like up a little bit, you might get like a little bit of this, right? Happens to everyone. We all know what I'm talking about. So let's say you want to kind of like just tuck it up a little bit. You want to bring it up in the photo. You're going to change the size of your circle here. And you can go ahead and you can just gently move different parts of the image in to start to create more definition in the face. And you can kind of see like a little ghost line right there, right? You can kind of see how much I have moved in her face. So we can maybe do that a little bit here. Everything you do should be super minimal. Otherwise, it's going to be one of those Photoshop fails that you see on like the tabloids where a Kardashian ends up with 3 fingers or something. So, don't do anything too crazy. But this tool, the Liquify tool, can be really good for some minimal changes. Okay. So then let me click here. I'm going to zoom out and see maybe an area where I can show you guys a more significant use of the tool. Let's scroll. We're just going to do it to her jacket because why not? You can make the circle really big And if you place where the center point about would be, you can successfully move something in quite a bit. All right, then hit OK when you want to accept your changes. And there you go. You see that how I made those changes, right? All right, so now we're going to save this and we're going to see how that when we close out of this, we're going to see how those changes are going to apply to the file that was linked in the other document. So there you go. No more red eyes, no blemishes. We can see the new definition I've created in her face and how I've straightened out her jacket right here, right? So something that was a request last week is the idea of masks. So what I want to do now is I want to get rid of her background so that it looks like this entire area of the sky, the trees, the lake, that's her background, right? And this would be a good time also for me to kind of show you guys the frizzy hair thing. Actually, I'm going to show you the frizzy hair thing first. I'm going to open the file back up again by double clicking the layer. If you have a simple background, it's a little easier. You can just use that same clone stamp tool. And this time you don't want it to be such a soft brush. I would change it to something like maybe 80-something%. And sometimes you'll play around with it and you might hit undo a couple times before you land on something perfect. I would just go in and I would sample some of the background and then I would start to erase her frizzy hair like that. And that will create a pretty seamless background there, and it will reduce the frizzy look of her hair, okay? And so that is just a really quick tutorial on how to reduce her frizzy hair. You can zoom in really close and you can start to, eliminate individual strands if you want, or you can fade it in a little bit by maybe bringing the hardness down. And that can kind of sometimes make it seem a little more natural. And that was what I was saying, like sometimes you kind of play around with it before you determine what a good hardness is, and you can kind of just keep going over it or hit undo. Okay. So you see this area here looks a little more natural than this over here. So that hardness seems to work really well. I'm just going to kind of go over it and you just keep going, you keep erasing. Okay. So there we go. We've removed some of these frizzy pieces. Perfect. So there you go. I'm going to save that progress, close out of it, and you'll see that those changes have been applied in this composition. So back to what I was going to do before. I kind of got off track there. Sorry about that. We're going to learn about masks. So that would be erasing her background. Okay. So the first thing you're going to do on the layer where you want to remove a background, or, it could be just even a small part of the image. You're going to make sure you've selected that layer. That's the layer you're working on, and you'll know that because it's highlighted. And you're going to, in the layers panel, click this little button on the bottom that is like a rectangle with a circle in the middle. And when you hover over it, you'll see it says add layer mask. So we're going to click that. And you'll notice what it does in the layers panel. There's a little linked icon here. And then now there's a white frame. And you'll notice that the white frame, the corners of it are highlighted. And that is to tell us that we are working on the mask, right? And then let's say I were to want to select the layer. If I click the photo, you'll see those little corners switch to the photo, but we want to work on the layer and not on the layer mask and not on the entire layer. So I'm going to click the layer mask symbol, which is this white frame here. And you'll know that that's selected, like I said, when those little corners appear on it. So we've selected the layer mask. I'm going to go to my selection tools. You guys probably have figured out, I love the quick selection tool. There's all kinds of tools that you can use. You could use the magic wand tool, but I just find that the quick selection tool is so easy. I'm not going to do a perfect job of it today. I'm just going to kind of grab what I can and hope for the best. In the quick selection tool, if you hold down the option key, you can add things back in, which is one of the reasons I like it. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and add some of these areas back in. And you know, if you were very seriously photoshopping something in, you would probably go in and be very careful about it. And you can see I'm leaving out some details that I probably really want to keep in. Okay, I am going to get rid of some of these curls here. Let me get rid of that one too. Okay, so now that we have the area selected in which we want to erase, we're going to go to our paintbrush tool. Okay. And the white and the black, when you are working in a mask, are going to do different things. So let me make my circle a little bigger. White puts the image back in, black removes it. So I've switched my paintbrush to black. I'm just going to go in and you'll see that it starts to erase the background. Okay. Now that's kind of a difficult concept. So I am going to delete my layer mask and I'm going to do it for you guys all over again. Okay. So here I go. I'm going to delete layer mask. Okay. So here's my image again. To add the mask, you have your layer selected and my cat is trying to drink my water. Click this button here at the bottom that says add layer mask, and it will pull up a new layer mask on that specific layer. And you'll know that that has a layer mask applied to it because it will be an empty white frame with a little linked icon here. Okay. So we're going to go in and we're going to select using a selection tool of our choice. I'm going to use the quick selection tool. We're going to select the area that we want to remove. Okay, you can go ahead and kind of finesse that a little bit. Great. And then using the paintbrush tool in the color black, we're going to eliminate the background. And then, like I was saying, white, we'll put it back. So white will kind of add in that color back and black will remove it. Okay. And then you can go ahead and deselect it. That little dotted line, to get rid of that, it's Command D. At least that's what it is on a Mac. I'm not sure what it is on a PC, but Command D. And now what you'll see here is we have a new background for our woman who we have previously photoshopped. And I think that's pretty cool. So another thing that I wanted to show you guys today is using an image that I've put in the Dropbox under a folder called Class 3. We're going to add another linked image in here. We're going to go to Place Linked. So this is what we did earlier. And this photo is a photograph of some birds. And this already has a white background for us, which is why I liked it. So I'm going to choose that. Resize that however you want in a way that you think the size of the birds is going to maybe look realistic in the background. You can move it then accordingly. All right. You'll notice I have that little photo credit here because, like I've told you guys before, I think that giving credit to the photographers that I am using, whose photos I'm using, is important. And so I did download this image off unsplash.com. So that little photo credit, I have placed that in the photo here. So I've placed it, resized it, and moved it in my frame. And what I want to do first is utilize my trick I just taught you guys about layer masks to get rid of my little photo credit here in the corner, because I don't want that to be part of the image, right? So go ahead and click that button when you have the layer selected. This time I don't necessarily need to use a selection tool to get rid of something. I can just simply get my brush tool out, resize it, and go in and just selectively erase what I need to erase, right? So that's what we look like right now in our composition. And today, something really important that I want to go over is the blending mode for a layer. So there are some kind of tricks that when you have a bunch of different photos layered in a file, you can actually use a mode to blend it into your photo. So right now it's on normal, and there's so many that as I hover over them, you'll see what it does to the composition. And I think that that's pretty cool. So you can just kind of play with all of them, and you can create some really interesting effects and layers. I'm going to use the one that says multiply, because what that one does is it basically is going to get rid of any of the white and show through the background for you. This really only works when a background is white though, which is why I have selected this specific image of the birds, because I only want the birds to show through, and I didn't want something with a background. So I'm going to click multiply. And what we've done now is we've made a semi-realistic composition that shows our woman we've been retouching on a new background with now some birds in the background. And you can do that with all kinds of things. You could make this really realistic, or you could do something crazy. You could make a UFO in the sky or whatever you want. So somebody had asked me before about removing something from an image, like say a bee from a flower. And something we talked about last week is not working off of your original background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my background layer, I'm going to drag it down onto this little icon that is a square with a plus sign, and create a new background copy layer, right? So it's going to be the same layer, and we're going to work off of the background copy, so we're not working off of the original. All right, I'm going to show that to you guys again. Just take the layer and drag it down onto this plus square with a plus sign, and that is the new layer option. It's a new layer, create new layer button. So we have background copy. I'm going to go in and I'm going to remove this castle. So what you can do is you can select your castle or whatever it is that you want to remove. You can do it with this selection tool. You can do it with a quick selection tool, whatever you want to do, right? You can just simply delete it. Now, you can't really see that because I had this background layer turned on, but we deleted it. There it is. Go back up to this move tool, and what you're going to see is that that area is still selected. It has those that little dancing dotted line. Some people call them the crawling ants. So you're going to right click on it. Oops, sorry. You want to be in this tool here, the marquee tool, and you'll know that that's the correct tool because it has the same little dancing dotted line or marching ants. You're going to right click, and we are going to click content aware fill. And it's going to kind of just fill it in with a section from, it's going to pull this up and it's going to kind of show you, it's going to allow you to choose a section that kind of looks realistic. And you just hit OK. All right. So when you unselect this, oops, hold on one second. When you unselect that, you'll see that there's sort of like a line here. And if you want to get rid of that, I would go in and kind of very carefully use that clone stamp tool to edit that. Oops, we're in the wrong layer. Okay, so what that did actually is it created a new layer for that. So I must have clicked that option instead of filling it in on the same layer. So I would highlight these two layers. This is actually a really good opportunity for me to show you how to join two layers and create one. You select the two layers that you want to combine. You highlight them in the layers panel. You can either hold down Command or you can hold down Shift to select both layers. Right click, and you're just going to click Merge Layers. And now it becomes one layer, right? And you can see I brought back the background layer here. It's turned on so that if I turn this off, you can see the difference, right? So we have that little line here, which is a problem. So I would just go in and I would fix it with my clone stamp tool. And I would just go in, and it's not perfect necessarily, but it's pretty close, you know. Go ahead and just clone it out. That didn't work. I'll take this little line. All right. It's pretty realistic, right? So we got rid of that. The easier way is you can just use the clone stamp tool to get rid of something. So I would maybe do that here. I would just find an area of the trees that I think looks kind of realistic. And I would just go ahead and essentially sample that area. Go ahead and bring that in right about here. And I would get rid of the house that way. And you could do that, you know, with a flower and a bee, just the same way. All right. So if we zoom out, you know, I didn't spend a lot of time there. You can spend a lot of time on these things and make them absolutely perfect. And you can get, you know, into a lot of detail. And that's totally up to you guys, how you want to do that. So, oh, 1 second. I realized my computer is not plugged in and it says my computer is about to die. So let me just get that here really quick. So what I would want to do here is I have my woman and her hair. You can see that there's a lot of differences in her hair. It's not perfect. It looks almost, you know, like I photoshopped her into this background, right? So what I would do is I would go to that layer. I would select the mask. I would get my brush tool out. Okay. I'm going to go zoom in, and I'm going to use a different size brush, and I'm going to go in and try to make her hair look a little more realistic, right? You can go in and you can kind of fix some of these areas. You know, that looks okay there. This could use a little bit of work. This area is a problem. So go in and kind of just touch up some of these areas. Same here, get rid of some of that glow around her from the old background. This looks kind of rough, so I just smooth it out. There we go. All right. So we've done a lot of work here. And we've added 2 different layers to create a new composition. So I'm going to do something I should have done a long time ago. So shame on me, learn from my mistakes, do as I say, not as I do. I'm going to save as, I'm going to save my composition, save it however you want. I would just call it composition 1. Okay. And choose the format. You want to choose the Photoshop format. The reason for that is Photoshop format saves layers. Let's say you were to save this as a JPEG. A JPEG is going to squish everything together. It's going to combine all your files into one. You do not want that if you want to go back in and edit this later. That's fine if you know that the document is ready for print. But if you have any intention of going in and editing these files later, you want to save it as a Photoshop document. Okay. You just hit OK. And you'll see here at the top, it is now titled composition1.psd. .psd is the file extension for a Photoshop document. So shame on me for not doing that sooner, but everyone should always save your work. And I think best practice is actually to save periodically, like every 5 minutes or so, maybe every 10 minutes if you're not making substantial changes. But so there we go. This is our new composition. We can do, let me check my lesson plan for the day. I want to make sure that I am not leaving anything out before I move on to the next topic, which is very important. Okay. All right. Great. So what we can do is if we look at this photograph and we feel like it's maybe not meshing, it's not meshing totally, right? Like maybe she feels a little bit more warm and the background feels really cool. And maybe we want to take and cool her down a little bit so she's not so yellow orange, and make it mesh a little bit better with our really cool blue green background. What we're going to do is we're going to, on her layer, we're going to go ahead and make sure that layer is selected. We're going to go to adjustments, and I would use photo filter in this instance. So last week we did go over the adjustments panel a little bit. And one of those adjustment layers you can add is called photo filter. So I would go in and I would select cooling filter. There are a few different ones, right? And you can reduce the density of it. I think actually maybe 80 seems like a little bit better. Okay, reduce the density of it, which means it's not so much blue. It's not as bright. And you'll see if I were to bring the density up a lot, it applies a lot more blue than it does here. Okay. So in the layers panel, this appears as a layer above her. The problem is it applies to every layer below it now. And we don't want that. We want this to apply only to the layer of our woman. So what you're going to do is you're going to hold down the Option key on your keyboard. And when I do that, you'll see that as long as my cursor is sort of in between these two layers, it will pull up this little arrow and square option. And if I click that, you will see that it then has a little arrow showing that it applies only to the layer directly below it and no other layers, right? So you see, we've applied that to the woman only. So again, I will do that for you guys. And the thing to note here is that that photo filter, that adjustment layer, has to be directly on top of the single layer you want it to apply to. Okay. So photo filter, I'm going to hold down the Option key and I'm going to hover my cursor in between so that that little arrow and square icon pops up. And you go ahead and click, and it will apply that directly to my woman. All right. So I think the fun thing to do at this point when you're creating a composition like this is to go ahead and start to hide the layers so you can see the original, see where you started. I just sort of start to turn things off. So this was our original background. You can tell it's original because it also has a little walk icon here. And you can start to add things back in. So here was where we removed the castles. Here's our woman. Here's our photo filter on the woman. If I toggle that, you can see how it changes her skin tone a little bit and kind of cools that photo down, makes it feel more like part of this image. And there are birds. So this is a really, really fun way to kind of see your progress just by turning the layers off and on. And if I wanted to make additional adjustments to our woman, the cool thing is if you are on the photo filter layer that is automatically applied only to her, and I were to go in maybe and add in a little bit of contrast, if I go back to layers, you can just go ahead and same thing, hold down the Option key. You can apply layers, adjustment layers on top of each other, and they will kind of apply their way down to that layer that you've applied this first one to. See? So if I were to toggle that, it's very minor because like I told you guys before, very minor adjustments are the best way to go. But there we have it. So this is the composition for the day. Are there any other retouching type of skills from last week that you guys want me to revisit? I was going to show you guys again how to use the blur tool really quickly, but I'm willing to take some requests if you guys have any requests. I'll keep an eye out in the chat, but what I'm gonna do is, again, I'm gonna double click on my woman layer. I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna use the blur tool to kind of smooth her skin. And that is located here. If you hold your finger down on the mouse and you click, it will pull up a little flyout menu, and blur tool is here at the top. Strength, I'm going to keep it around 45–50% here. This is really good for reducing the appearance of fine lines, wrinkles, or pores. Just kind of use it and paint over the area, and you'll see it will start to blur things, which can be really nice. It can just kind of like smooth your skin a little bit. Okay, just go in, and it's not very noticeable, but it does make a difference. You know, it can kind of give you a little bit of an airbrushed look. If I were to bring this up to 100, you'll see that the difference is much more noticeable. You know, and if I were to go over an area that is crisp and should stay crisp, like her eye, you'll notice how it really blurs her eye. And we don't want to do that, because we want something like your eyes to be very crisp. Okay. We're going to use the dodge tool to whiten the whites of her eyes. We're just going to go ahead in here and use that, and you'll see it's brightening her eyes a lot. And then these were skills I talked about last week, but it doesn't hurt to revisit them this week, just in a quick manner. We're not going to dive in as deep as we did last week. The burn tool will make things darker. So a lot of people might use this to accentuate features like her eye. So it darkens almost, you can give yourself like a little thicker lash or like an eyeliner almost. See how easy that is? You just take it and you go around the eye area. And you can, again, this is just like the dodge tool. You can change the exposure to be really small. You know, if you don't want to add a ton of darkness to something, let's say I wanted to just kind of go over her lips and like add a little bit of darkness to her lips. You could kind of do that with a lower amount of exposure using the burn tool. All right. And so these are a couple of changes that I made. And another good tool that I know I've talked about every class, but it's worth mentioning again, is the history tool. When you're making an edit in a document, you can see all of the actions you've taken listed under the history tool. And if I were to click open, you could see the change, you could see the original. And then if I click at the end where I just left off, which is right here, burn tool, you will be able to see the changes I make. And you can see how really small changes can actually be really significant. So I'm going to hit save. And what you'll notice is after it saves and I close out of it, those changes will have applied to my woman. All right. Okay. So I'm going to show you guys how to duplicate a layer, and then that's going to be the sort of last thing for the night. So I have these birds here. I want to actually create another layer of birds. I want some birds over here, or maybe I just want to make it look like the flock is a lot bigger. If you just go ahead and you drag that layer, like I said, over this square with a plus sign in it, it will have created another layer, and it will create that layer over itself. So it's in the identical spot. So all you have to do is go ahead and move it, and you can move it wherever it is you want to. And then you can do it again, and you can just create more layers, right? So another way to do that is on a Mac, if you hold down the Option key, you'll see it changes your cursor from the black arrow with the little almost like compass arrows next to it. Hold down Option. And then if you see that it now looks like a black and a white arrow layered on top of each other, click and drag, it will drag your layer. It will duplicate it, and you can move it accordingly. All right. So there you go. Bunch of crows flying in the background. At least I think they're crows. I'm not sure. But a way that you can quickly scale something is by using Command T. T as in train. Command T will allow you to scale it. You can make it a lot smaller and then hit the check mark to accept changes. So there we go. We have drastically changed the background of this woman to a very regal lake setting with a lot of crows in the sky. And we have saved it as a Photoshop document so we can open it up later on to edit any of the layers that we want. Okay. So some of these concepts I know were a little bit more advanced, like masking and applying adjustment layers to a specific layer. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. It's 7:15. So I think Sam and Carrie can stop the recording and we can take some questions.